Hi, and welcome to this podcast. My name is James Rozak. Morning Mercy is a place dedicated to helping former followers of the teachings of William Branham to find a healing journey away from everything that you knew and were comfortable in. It's a very fearful, emotionally traumatizing experience when you're choosing a different path. And I acknowledge that. And so I like to speak to issues that would encourage, that would inform, that would educate, and hopefully provide you with a path of healing for yourself. I do like to speak to emotional things more than doctrinal things. And so that's where I'm going to be going again today. And first, I'd like to just say, if you happen to be watching this and you are on that journey away from the message, I'm just really proud of you. I know it's a very difficult thing. I know you're probably experiencing a lot of mixed emotion. There's no doubt dynamics happening all around you with family, just even in the world around you, trying to make sense of your place in the world now. It's something that I remember very well and vividly when I made my decision over 10 years ago now. Yeah, it's difficult. I see you, and I appreciate that you would join me for this particular episode. And so, what I would like to talk about today is something that maybe not everybody has felt or experienced, but it's a question that has come up many times to me or around me, either from people in this journey away, or maybe there's somebody who is still in the message and they're trying to pitch their case as to why it should feel impossible to go. There are people who have some pretty inspiring testimonies of where they came from and how they came to the message and how their life essentially transformed. And so credit can be quickly given to the God of William Branham, to the material that he taught, to the church atmosphere and the moving of the Spirit in the church. And surely because this was in the message, well, this could happen no other place than the message. I was actually, in my mind, I was almost surprised when I heard testimonies that occurred outside the message. I had to almost do mental gymnastics to allow those stories to be true. Like, oh yeah, I guess God can work outside of the message too. That was how I could justify, because in my mind, this was the place that God was alive. Why would he be doing things out there? This is where he's alive. This is where the evidence of his resurrection currently is. And so when you would hear a testimony of somebody coming out of the world, well, it just made a whole lot of sense. Like, of course, this is where miracles happen. So it's a point of confusion why you would turn away from a testimony in the message. How could you reject the message if it produced this in your life? For myself personally, my dad always used to say that, despite leaving the message many years ago, that's part of my own testimony. Is my family left when I was very young, and I made my way back under the influence of my grandmother, other family members, my own sense of depression, my own story of brokenness. I was looking for life. I was looking for purpose and meaning, and the message came in and filled that void for me. And so I felt like I came alive. But my dad, he said even though he walked away from the message years ago, he was thankful for what it gave him, because it kept him from family history of, say, alcoholism and gambling and things which were a detriment, could have been a detriment to his own life and his own family. So that was a perspective he brought, and I always listened to that. And, I can understand why he would say that. So the belief is that the message is the force, the power, the evidence of why change in our conduct and our behavior and the modesty that you see in our sisters and brothers, it's the result of the power that is in the message. The bottom line is that a lot of people come from a dark place and they find through desperation a great transformation in the message. And that can be confusing. So to explain some of that from my view, it's simply this. Point one, social pressure is very effective. Social pressure is very effective. Studies show that we are very suggestible. We're easily influenced in pressurized social situations. We don't like to be othered or alienated or to stand out from the crowd, the spotlight on us because we are the only one doing something different. And so when there is a group identity in practice, such as you walk into a church, and if I could give a little story, I remember years ago when I was early in the message in my workplace, I was, sharing things about myself with my coworkers, and I mentioned I was a Christian. There was a girl who worked there, and she said, "Well, I'm looking for a church." And so I was like, "Oh, well, you could come to my church." And she was like, "Well, that sounds really good." So we made arrangements for her to come with me to my church in the message. And we walked in, and how long do you think it took for her to recognize that she was different? Based on my conversations with her afterward, it was immediate. She walked in and she could tell. And now that I never gave her any preparation. I didn't tell her how she should come dressed. I didn't give her any prepping or any warning. She just came. And right away she could tell that she wasn't dressed the same. And she could see that there was certain things that were done in the congregation during worship and during the preaching. And even the way that the preaching was done, she had never quite experienced it before. And so she felt very out of place and a little bit uncomfortable, which she expressed to me after. It's because she was walking into a group dynamic that was in practice. We have a group identity. And you'll see it in the way that we dress, in the way that we act, in the way we speak, in the way that we think, in the way we behave and do our lives together. The group is taught also to protect and preserve this group identity. So it's very prevalent and it's very strong. And what you'll learn if you spend time within the group, like if that particular girl had stuck around, she would be met with pressure to change her conduct, her dress, her behavior to come in line with the group. Because the fact is, she's not allowed to be different. Nobody is allowed to be different. So social pressure is very effective in whatever context. The message really, when you come into a church, it's a behavior boot camp. You'll attend meetings very often because meetings are held very often. We have Sunday service, and I know it's changing these days, but it used to be, twice on Sundays, Wednesday, special meetings, prayer meetings. And when we have special meetings, it's like a full weekend. It's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's a full thing, and it's frequent. We are expected to attend these meetings because it falls in line with that idea that we're separating from the world. We want to be in the atmosphere of the Word. We want to be changing ourselves. We want to be molding our lives in the Spirit of God into His image. And so we frequently are attending. We're separating from the world. We're being adopted into this new family. Some of us are born into the family, and so we learn from a very young age to do all the things that we're supposed to do. It's just part of our fabric, part of our identity, part of all that we know. We listen frequently to the tapes, to the ministry, to we read the books, and we're just surrounded by this constantly. It's a pressure that's always on us. So if you're, say, struggling to overcome habits that are self-destructive, let's say you're somebody who's outside of the church and you're in that really low place and you're looking to escape yourself, what better place to go to get immediate or powerful results than a place that does not allow you to be an individual? Because it's strictly enforced with rules, with boundaries, with expectations, with pressure, with teaching that's intended to completely change and shape and limit your behavior so that you fit in with the collective group. So when somebody comes in and they have a fantastic testimony of transformation, it actually makes a lot of sense why that would happen. It's a good place for transformation to occur. Because here's the second point is you don't have a choice. You do not have a choice. You might think you have a choice, and in the message rhetoric, to appease ourselves, we would say things like it's a grace-based gospel. It's by the grace of God that we're here. And no, we are not a legalistic church. We're not legalistic at all. We just believe the Spirit convicts the soul and you're changed from the inside out. And yet, here's the fact. Unless you change, you will not be welcome. That's something that nobody will comfortably admit. But we all know it's true. Look, if the woman comes into the church wearing her earrings, her makeup, and her pants, how long do you think she's going to last? She's going to be othered. She's going to be uncomfortable. And that discomfort is going to come in forms of preaching. It's just going to come in forms of observing the atmosphere, the people around who are all aligned in accord with the dress code. And here's this lady now fully out of line, out of sync with the group. She's not going to have a choice but to change because the preaching is going to become more pointed. And I saw it happen many times where the preacher would come in and he would say this, forgive me for finding humor in this, but I did. The minister would come in and he would say, and now he would get on a tangent and he would start talking about, somebody wearing earrings. And he was like, this wasn't in my notes. I don't know, this is inspired by the Holy Spirit. And I don't know why I feel to say this right now, but I'm saying this right now. And like 3 rows back, 2 seats in is the auntie of somebody who is in the congregation who just decided to show up in service. And well, golly gee, she happens to have makeup and earrings, and she had no idea what she was walking into. But woo, by the inspired Spirit, the preacher is suddenly going on a tangent about earrings. There was a time I think I would be like, ooh, it's the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. Like, how could he know? And I realized later as I was a preacher myself and I would look across the congregation and boy, it was quick and easy to pick out the people who were with me and the people who weren't. And I could see the people who were uncomfortable. And I could also see the people who were a little worldly. And yeah, they stand out like a sore thumb because everybody else is uniform. And so, yeah, the inspired preacher is now picking on the lady with earrings. How long do you think she's going to last? How comfortable do you think she's going to be? And if she changes, is it going to be because she's being convicted by the Holy Spirit, or is it going to be the guy standing behind the pulpit with his finger in her nose telling her that she's wrong? There's a lot of pressure in being part of a congregation like this. And because social pressure is very effective, yeah, you're going to see people begin to change their lives, because if they want to be in the group, why would you stay if you're going to just be a continual target? You're going to change. You're going to adapt. You're going to change your life to be in alignment with everybody else so that you feel that you're not judged. So that you don't feel that pressure and that tension. So that you feel accepted and approved and welcomed by the community. We're always looking for acceptance. We're always looking for approval. And it's unfortunate, but even as a child looking to a parent, the way to be accepted and approved in a message family is adherence and obedience. If you don't comply and change, you're going to be judged and pressured. Because tolerance is limited. It can only go on so far, and eventually that grace is going to run out. So we quickly give credit to the message having this power and the spirit to transform lives. And so this is the reflection that I simply am offering. Could it be that what we're observing in these transformation stories is actually social pressure in action? It makes a whole lot of sense to me. And that's how I now have begun to see it. It's why we send our kids to youth camps in a message church. It's because we're trying to get them so ingrained and so transformed in their mind and so pressurized that they don't want to touch the worldly things. Because, man, you get whipped in the service if you do. And you're going to be there at the altar crying once again for being such a horrible, sinful, shameful person because you're doing the thing that you're not supposed to do. And so you're always trying to bend yourself and to die a little bit more and to abstain and to remove yourself from the world as much as you can so that you don't have to get whipped every time you come to church. And it feels good. And it feels like, wow, I'm accepted and I'm approved and I'm one of them. And wow, this feels wonderful. And it does feel good when you're no longer in the spotlight of that pressure. Yeah, compliance feels good when you're in a community like this. It feels really good. Also consider this. Hey, I have Mormon friends. And when I listen to their stories of their transformation to become a Mormon, guess what? Mormons, when they become Mormons, they act like Mormons, they speak like Mormons, they do like Mormons, they change their conduct, they change aspects of their lifestyle. You know why? It's because they're experiencing the same social pressure. This is going to sound really crazy, but like message teaching, message churches produce message followers. People who bend and adapt and change so that they can fit into the message box. Mormons, Muslims, Pentecostals, whatever church, they're going to put pressure on you to think and change the way that you think and the way that you behave. And you're going to be transformed by the influence that you're under. Many times and frequently, you're going to see this happen. And that's why we do say, and it's true, the message will say, if you go out into the world, if you go to that rock and roll concert, you might end up like those rock and roll people. And the fact of the matter is, yeah, it's kind of true. You kind of will adapt to the social pressure that you're under. So it's not this mystical, magical thing that a message person or that somebody coming into a message congregation is suddenly going to take on message characteristics. Of course they will. They're under that pressure to conform to everything that a message believer is supposed to be. And so will that happen to a Mormon, and so will that happen to a Muslim, and so will that happen to anybody who steps into any group dynamic. So my advice is simply this. It's kind of the direction that I've taken in my life, is because I'm very aware of influence no matter where I am and who I'm with. Having been under that influence and that intense influence, to give up aspects of me, to lose my own identity to take on the group identity. I know in the message that's a wonderful thing, but when you begin to realize that the message, if you're part of a group that's falsely representing itself, and you give up your life, like the extent of the loss that you feel is excruciating. That's why it's so painful to walk away from the message, when you recognize that this prophet that we followed maybe wasn't as honest as we thought, maybe wasn't as good as we thought. We gave up our life. We gave up years of our life. We walked away from opportunities, from friendships, from relationships, from dreams, from things that we really would love to try and do, and yet we can't because we have to fall in line with the mandate of the church. Because the mandate of the church is that you cannot deviate from what the church is asking you to be. So developing faculties of thought for critical thinking, it's very important. Doesn't matter where you go after the message. Even if you're in the message, that's a great starting point, is to develop a sense of critical thinking where you can actually look at what the pastor said or what the pastor is asking you to do, and you can think about it for a moment and maybe come to the conclusion that that is bad advice, that what you're saying is actually not true, neither is it right, neither is it good for me or my family or my future or my situation. I've seen pastors give horrible advice and do terrible things in the name of God because they thought that they were in the position of authority to dictate for you how you should behave. And they apply pressure by virtue of their office. Critical thinking is a wonderful antidote to a lot of things that you're going to find and encounter throughout your life. Groupthink is all around us in this world. Develop the skill of critical thinking. And that could mean that you're become very aware of the influences around you. It could be your parental relationships. It could be your siblings, the family dynamic that you're in. It could be your workplace. It could be your marriage situation. Consider the influence that you're surrounded with on a day-to-day basis. Those are things that you begin to feel empowered to do when you step away from a group dynamic like the message. And now there you are standing on the outside of the church, and they're screaming at you to get back in line. And they're telling you, you have to come back into the church if you're going to survive, if you're going to be alive in Christ, if you're going to have any future, if your family is going to have any hope, if you're going to make anything of your life, you have to get back into this church and fall back in line. When that becomes something that you no longer automatically bow to, and you challenge their words, and you challenge their pressure and their thoughts, and you just decide, I'm going to consider my options, and I'm going to actually consider the alternatives, and I'm going to make a choice that's good for me and my life and my future and my family. That's a very different place to arrive at. So that also might mean that you intentionally choose your mentors and the influences that you follow. Because I remember hearing this all the time in the message, you're going to follow somebody. And it's not that I think of it in terms of like you just mindlessly following after, somebody or some figure or some form of teaching. But I do say this, that we are constantly under influence. So if you're going to listen to somebody, even somebody like myself, or it doesn't matter who you're listening to, but if you're listening to anybody, you have the freedom to choose your mentors and the influences that have impact on your life. And when you choose those people, make it intentional. Make it based on what you've learned about them and the things you do and don't like. And if there are things that you don't like, you don't have to swallow the whole thing. You can actually say, you know what, I really respect these viewpoints that they hold. There's some other things that I'm not sure about, but that's okay because I've critically thought and examined. And when those things come up, I have my own thoughts about those. That's the evolution of somebody when they discover their own sense of thinking and the freedom to have your own mind engaged in whatever situation, in whatever issue or topic. And when you choose mentors, this is the way I look at it. I look to people who represent who I want to become. They're demonstrating an attribute, a virtue, some form of character that I admire. And I say, I want to be more like that. So yeah, I have many mentors. I don't have one. I have many sources of inspiration. I don't just have one. And for the things that happened in the past and coming out of the message, and if you did have a transformative experience, because like I said earlier, sometimes we do come from dark places. I was in a very deep state of depression when I arrived at the message. I'm sure it had a lot to do with why I went down that road. Because when I came to the message, you know what happened to my depression? It was gone. It was gone. From the day I walked into the church, I felt like my depression was gone. It had a very positive effect in that regard. And there's reasons for that, and I could explain that. But, for somebody who is maybe mired down in depression, alcoholism, maybe they were substance abusers, maybe they were in terrible relationships, maybe they were making all kinds of bad decisions that was having a very negative impact on their life, and they needed a reset, and they needed to come to a place that would help them. So they walked into the church, and boom, they were in an environment that didn't give them the options to practice the bad behaviors. And the boundaries actually contained them, so they benefited from it. And in that regard, you might even say that good came from it. Like my dad saying, there was his own father was an alcoholic. When I hear my dad speak about his family dynamic growing up and the way his household was run, the way that his mother had to compensate for the lack of what his own father was able to contribute, I can see why my dad has such feelings about alcohol. And so coming to the message environment, well, it definitely closed the door on the possibility of being influenced by anything in that realm. So he gives credit to that. If you have a testimony of that kind where you were saved from yourself in a sense, bravo, who am I to criticize that? But that's a separate issue and a separate topic than the issues that prevail in the message that made you want to leave. Both things could be simultaneously true. The message is actually a place where the prophet leader misrepresented and lied. And things that he said were so absolutely true were not. And the lifestyle that you built your life around the teachings that he provided you, yeah, that whole thing crumbled to the ground. But at the same time, you can recognize positives and benefits that came from the time that you were in the message. If you can walk away with positives and even have gratitude for some of that, that's a much better place to be. The idea isn't just to have anger and bitterness rise up and everything about your life in the message was horrific and terrible. For some people, that's what they'll walk away with. But if you could walk away with grains of gratitude, some positives to hold on to and to carry with you, and to nourish those parts of your experience, well then, yes, like if you can do that, do that. But this is what I really feel, is that the message above all is a lifestyle. It's a social group that has a lifestyle that they voraciously, viciously protect. I've said this many times and I believe it's true. You don't have to actually believe the message to be accepted and to be approved within the community. Do you know what you need to do? You need to not criticize the prophet. You need to not criticize your pastor. You need to show up to church. And you need to show up wearing the right clothes. That's it. If you can do those things, you're accepted and approved by the group. The message is an environment that only wants you to keep showing up, to keep praising the prophet, to keep living the life. And if you do that, I hope this helps in some way, even just to give a little bit of perspective on the reason why you look back and, you have even some bittersweet feelings of good times and bad times, of positive things that you got out of it and how it maybe even helped you in certain ways. And then in other ways it felt so horrible, and you're trying to, wrestle with the juxtaposition of these conflicting feelings and ideas. So yeah, if you do have a testimony that came out of the message, understanding why maybe that you even had that testimony and what to do with those feelings, maybe it would be helpful to understand this in some way. I'm going to be continuing to make videos of this kind where I just talk about issues like this from my perspective. You can even completely disagree with what I'm saying, and that's totally fine. I don't mind. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to think for yourself. You're allowed to disagree with me. And even that, I feel like there's a great amount of nuance in any issue and any topic. I'm bringing my view. You might say, oh yeah, but you didn't say this. Well, I could probably talk about this for 3, 4, 5 hours. Bringing in personal stories and experiences and people that I've met, my own testimony and how I came in, and there's a lot of expansive information within a subject like this. And so, yeah, the idea though is just to spark conversation within your own mind to make sense of what you've experienced and what you're going through even right now, maybe the emotional turmoil, and just trying to put things in a perspective where you can get past it and continue to grow and continue to understand and make a future for yourself, full of healing is what the goal would be. Thank you for joining me. My name is James. This is Morning Mercy. I hope to see you again. If you have any comments, by all means, put them down there. I'm going to be making some videos based on comments that I've received already. So if there's a subject or anything that you'd like me to cover, send it my way. I'll see what I can do. Thanks a lot. Take care.